All the way at the end of this road before you get to Blue Ridge Baptist Church is the Green River Preserve. The Schenck family bought that land in the 1950s, and in 1987 a member of the Schenck family turned that into the Green River Preserve, and it's also a boys and girls summer camp and a nature center. And that's where the headwaters of the Green River are located. I'm going to talk about some of these other cemeteries. We've got a descendant here of Peter Anders. The Anders family came in here between 1820 and 1830. They came up from Greenville, South Carolina, and they have hundreds and thousands of descendants in Henderson and Transylvania County. Their ancestor is Peter Anders. They use the name Anders and Andrews interchangeably. So some of those descendants go by Andrews and some of them go by Anders. And there are 3 small cemeteries here in the community called Anders cemeteries. One is on Bob's Creek Road, and it's on the property, it's right in the people's yard. It's actually off their driveway to the right. They keep it very well maintained, and it's a very, very old cemetery, and hardly any of the tombstones are legible. It's on the website, Sam, under Anders Cemetery, Bob's Creek Road, and I think your Lindsay Baker Anders' brother is buried there, Henson, I believe. Check on that website and see how I listed that. That's the only marked stone there, so we think that may be where a lot of the Anders family are buried, because it's unmarked field stones. There's another Anders cemetery with just a couple little graves on that Schenck property on Green River Road I talked about, and there is an Andrews cemetery off Andrews Road, which goes off Green River Road, with only 2 or 3 graves. We're going to, when we leave here, we're going to immediately turn left on Bob's Creek Road. Bob's Creek Baptist Church is down there. That church was established somewhere between 1900 and 1920. It'll be on the left. They're in the process of building a new church. They are using and maintaining an old cemetery that in the Henderson County Cemeteries book is called the Henderson Cemetery. And you can read about that under the historic cemeteries. I do not know why they called it the Henderson Cemetery, and I'll tell you that in the article, because the oldest graves in there are of the Ward and Shipman and Redden families. And the Hendersons didn't even die in the 1950s, so I don't understand why they called it the Henderson Cemetery.
Martha Henderson gave the land for the cemetery.
Is that why they call it that? But there's graves in there much older,
yeah,
that are the Wards and the Shipmans and so forth. There was a lead post office. Where was that located?
It was over right at the South Carolina line.
No, that was Caps. Now, according to Lenore Ray, the lead post office was somewhere down here. He called it facing Pretty Man Mountain, and it had to be somewhere down here around Cabin Creek, Rock Creek, or somewhere in here.
Okay, it should be back down the road about a mile, because this is Pretty Man Mountain over here.
Where?
Where Falling Creek Camp is at.
Falling Creek Camp?
Yeah.
Leon and I couldn't find Pretty Man Mountain. It's not listed in the Gazetteer. It's not listed on the topographical maps. It's not listed anywhere. What's the proper name for it?
I don't know. Ward. It's a Ward Mountain.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Well, according to Lenore Ray, the mail went from zirconia to lead to Caps to Splendor. So we figured it had to be somewhere around in here on Green River Road or Rock Creek, Cabin Creek, somewhere down in here, that lead post office.
So the lead post office most likely got its name from Matthew and his family whenever they sold lead and silver in Atlanta in the late 1700s and 1800s. And it's a well-kept secret. Nobody knows where they mined it at.
Because I heard that story, that there are these stories and legends that there was these lead mines down in here in the 1800s.
And nobody knows where they mined it?
No.
Well, that's interesting. I've been wanting to know where that lead post office was.
Well, I asked my daddy, I said, who's buried up there in the Maven Cemetery? And he said, a bunch of witches and hangers. Well, kind Kind of found out the reason they was classified as witches and ain'ts. A lot of them never married. They all lived in single-room cabins that they built in the middle of the field, right near the graveyard. And I tended that field a couple of years up there, and it wasn't nothing to plow up stones that you could tell that a building had been set on. And they said that they had staves like up around her house that they kept her hogs in to keep wild critters away from them. And said on the porches, they had all kind of sacks and bags hung up with different herbs and seeds and things like that. That was really a booby trap back in the way. But all of them, one room cabin with porches on. And George Maben, he was a son, and he was the first church clerk in 1847. He died in 1865. And he's got some of the prettiest handwriting you ever saw. We've still got, you know, church records and all of that. And they gave the land for the first church when it was originally established. And then our grandson gave it for the present church, and also for the Cedar Springs School that's across the road from where the church is at. And I'm not sure on the date on it, but I got a school roster of 1893, so it had to be in existence before then. And I got one of 1907, and my grandfather was in the 4th grade, and there was a lot of them still in the 1st grade that was 21 years old. And it gives her age and days and all like that. And Lethea Hart, she was to teach the 5 grades, clean the school, keep fire going, and it was based on how many attended school. And the max pay for a month was $30.
Wow.
Most of the time it was down around
There was a
25.
one-room schoolhouse right down here at Cedar Springs Baptist Church. There was a one-room schoolhouse up near Green River Baptist Church. And I've seen notes in the late 1800s, references to a one-room lodge schoolhouse somewhere up on Cabin Creek Road, further up near Pinnacle. I'm thinking it might be near where that old Mountain Valley or the old Poplar Springs was or something. I'm not really sure.
Estella student was the last teacher at it. And working on getting some pictures of it.
Wow. Double Springs, which we're going to later, also had a one-room school down near Double Springs Baptist also. So there were a lot of little one-room schools that we've already been to the Tuxedo School, and I gave them the history of that. So a lot of these one-room schools, they all closed, and kids started going to the Tuxedo School in the 1920, about 1920, 24, 25. We passed part of the Fallen Creek Camp. That was formed in 1969 by Jim Miller, and then Chuck McGrady had that, and now the Farr family owns it. Doesn't that go all down to Bob's Creek too? Yeah, you can get that from Bob's Creek Road. The Beddingfield Cemetery is on Bob's Creek Road. We are not going to take Bob's Creek Road that far to the Beddingfield Cemetery, but I will tell you that Nathaniel Beddingfield, his first land deed in the Green River community was 1808. So the Beddingfield family has been here a long, 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 long time. So you'll see lots and lots of their descendants, and they have an old cemetery there on Bob's Creek Road. The Thompson cemeteries, there isn't one that we're going to pass right after you turn on Bob's Creek Road that he said the church is now maintaining. It's in the middle of a pasture. And so there's a fence around the cemetery, and the cemetery is sitting in the middle of the cow pasture. All of these are written up on the HendersonHeritage.com. And I think 2 of the most interesting people buried there, one is George Clyde Beddingfield, who Darren and I remember very well. He died in the Vietnam War. Sam, you may remember George Beddingfield. And he died there in the Vietnam War. And our Disabled American Veterans chapter here in Henderson County, the Beddingfield Child chapter, is named after George Clyde Beddingfield. The other person buried there is Moses Heatherly. And Please read about that cemetery on the website if you'd like to. The Heatherly family probably suffered more as a single family during the Civil War as any other family. They were from this area. There were about 5 of those boys that died at Camp Douglas, at the Union prison camp, at Camp Douglas in Chicago. It's a very sad story. There's 2 children's graves on Rock Creek Road that are also said to be Thompson children. Am I correct on that? They call the Thompson Cemetery.
I was thinking it was Merle's, but I don't know.
It may be Merrill's.
Yeah.
We're not really sure who they are. Somebody told George Jones that it was Thompson kids, and I think that's why he named it the Thompson Cemetery, but they're not marked, so we don't know.
Supposedly the last one buried in the Maven Cemetery was a Merle also.
Okay.
And there was a lot of Merles in the area, to my understanding, because they done a lot of timber cutting and whatnot. And whenever someone passed or whatnot, they didn't go back to their home place and bury them. They buried them a lot of times close to where they was at. And they just had rock headstones put up for them, and that's it.
That's right. So we don't know who a lot of these folks are, these fieldstones. He's exactly right about that. Now there's one cemetery that as we drive down Bob's Creek Road, we're going to turn right on Gap Creek. All of you have your directions. We're going to be going through Robert Morgan country down in that area. There's an old cemetery down there that it took us years to find. And I've described that as, it's called in the cemetery book, the Redden Cemetery. And there appears to be somebody named Redden buried in that cemetery. But I give you the history of the land under the Redden Cemetery, under historic cemeteries. That was one of the, next to the Cap Cemetery, that had to be the worst hike I've ever made. I must have crossed 4 or 5 people's private property, and the last few hundreds of yards we were literally crawling on our hands and knees through briars. I was scratched and cut up for weeks. It was horrible, and I called it the Brewer Rabbit Thicket. Michael Arrowwood and Jay Jackson spent many, many weekends trying to clear that out. It's probably been overgrown since then. But we found triple the number of gravestones after it was cleared out than what the Henderson County, North Carolina Cemetery book had listed in there. There's also an unknown cemetery, because we don't know who's buried in it, off Terry's Creek Road. Fanny Morgan, Robert Morgan's mother, called me up and insisted I come down. And she was in her at 91 at the time. She was 91 at the time, Robert Morgan's mom, Fanny. Called me up, said, you got to come down here because they're liable to cover these graves up. I said, what graves? She said, well, nobody knows about this cemetery. So Jay Jackson and I came down. She took us down there off Terry's Creek Road and walked us up into this wooded area that she insists was full of graves in the 1930s and when she was a child, and it had numerous graves in it, but all the fieldstones are gone. So Leon, am I correct that the board voted in 2006 to put that on the GIS layer?
Yes.
Yeah, but we have no idea who's buried there, do we?
Me and Jennie went all over that place, and we couldn't find anything that looked like a grave marker.
So we don't know anything about it.
No.
Has anybody done the probing there, I wonder?
Has anybody done any probing there?
Not to my knowledge.
But we did vote to have it marked because she was absolutely insistent, and she actually got 2 or 3 other old folks in the community to verify that there was graves there and that they had seen them.
She said when she was a child, the stone was there, and there was a road, you know, it was like a cemetery, and somebody picked them up and moved them for some reason. I don't know if they tended it for field crops or why they moved them.
She insists it used to be very way back when she traced the deeds. She said that, and Robert Morgan told me the JUSTUS Justice family, that justice that used to own land down here, you know who I'm talking about?
Well, Daniel Justice owned the 520 acres that my great-great-grandfather Daniel baseball team.
Well, Robert Morgan and his mom Fanny said when they traced the deeds on that cemetery thing, it went all the way back to that Justice over in Old Buncombe.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's possible, Bob, it's some of the Just Us folks, you know. She said they never remember seeing any names on any of the fieldstones.
No, she said there wasn't any name.
Yeah. So we're going to leave here and go Bob's Creek Road, Gap Creek Road, up to the Old Elks Camp for Boys and talisman programs, and we'll talk more there, yeah.
Any theories on why Matthew Maven is not mentioned?
I have no idea. Do you? Leon, do you?
Nobody just didn't pick him up when he's doing the head.
I think Sadie Smathers Patton was so focused on the Mills River area and her family and William Mills, which she got totally wrong. She even got her own family wrong out there. That she didn't, she never seemed to acknowledge anything east of the Continental Divide, did she?
It appears that way.
Because all of the Green River, Zirconia, and Tuxedo, and Upward Main and all that, that's all east of the Continental Divide. And she